The zipper of my tent screamed in the silence. A sharp, metallic rasp that tore through the midnight calm. My heart stopped, breath trapped in my throat as I bolted upright, clutching the flimsy sleeping bag to my chest. Under the pale glow of the moon filtering through the nylon, I saw the shadow of a man, broad-shouldered and looming, just outside my fragile sanctuary. I was alone in the Olympic National Forest, miles from the nearest town. My only companions the whispering pines and the distant howl of a coyote. I'd come here to escape the suffocating expectations of my small-town life in Ellensburg, Washington, where everyone knew me as Ezra, the quiet mechanic's son who never quite fit in. At 25, I'd packed my beat-up Jeep with a tent, a cooler, and a desperate need to figure out who I was away from the weight of their stares. But now, as the tent flap peeled back and a stranger's silhouette filled the opening, I realized solitude wasn't the only thing I'd found. "Don't scream." His voice came, low and rough, like gravel under boots. "I'm not here to hurt you." My pulse thundered, but something in his tone steady, almost pleading, kept me from grabbing the pocket knife tucked in my backpack. He crouched, his face catching the moonlight. Rugged, late 30s, with a jawline dusted with stubble and eyes that held a storm of their own. "Name's Caleb," he said, raising his hands to show they were empty. "I saw your fire earlier. I need help." His voice cracked on the last word, and I noticed the tear in his jacket, the faint smear of blood on his sleeve. "Who are you?" I managed, my voice barely a whisper. I wasn't sure if I was more afraid of him or the fact that I wasn't running. "I'm just a guy who got lost," he said, but his eyes told a different story, one of running, not wandering. "Look, I'll leave if you want. But I'm out of water, and I'm not sure I'll make it to morning without it." Against every instinct, I nodded, pointing to the jug by my cooler. He moved slowly, deliberately, like he was trying not to spook a wild animal. As he drank, I studied him, the way his hands shook slightly, the dirt smudged across his knuckles, the weight of something unspoken hanging in the air. I should have been terrified, but there was a pull in my chest, a reckless curiosity I couldn't shake. "Why are you out here alone?" I asked, surprising myself. He wiped his mouth, hesitating. "Same reason as you, I'd guess. Trying to find something." His gaze met mine, and for a moment, the forest fell away. I didn't know it then, but that moment his eyes locking with mine under the moonlight was the spark that would set my whole world ablaze. We sat by the dying embers of my campfire, the night pressing in around us. Caleb told me fragments of his story. He was from Portland, a carpenter by trade, but he'd left the city after a fight with his family. "They didn't take kindly to who I am," he said, his voice tight. He didn't elaborate, but I understood. I'd felt that same rejection, the kind that cuts deeper than any knife. Growing up in Ellensburg, I'd hidden my truth-me attraction to men behind a mask of silence, terrified of what it would cost me. "You don't talk much, do you?" Caleb said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I talk when I've got something to say." I shrugged, trying to play it cool even as my heart raced. There was something about him raw, unguarded, that made me want to spill every secret I'd ever kept. He chuckled, a sound that warmed the cold night. "Fair enough. But you've got a story, Ezra. I can see it in your eyes." I looked away, the firelight dancing on the ground. He was right, but I wasn't ready to let him in. Not yet. Instead, I offered him a corner of my tent to sleep in, telling myself it was just for one night. As he settled in, his breathing steadying into a soft rhythm, I lay awake, staring at the canvas ceiling. The forest was quiet, but inside me, A storm was brewing, one that would either destroy me or set me free. By morning, Caleb was gone, leaving behind a folded note tucked under my water jug. Thanks for not turning me away. I owe you. My heart sank and soared at the same time. I didn't know who he was or why he was running, but I knew one thing: I had to find him again. I packed up camp, my hands trembling as I loaded the Jeep. The note burned a hole in my pocket, a fragile thread connecting me to a stranger who'd already changed everything. I drove toward the nearest ranger station, hoping for a trace of him, but the forest was vast, and Caleb was a ghost. Still, something told me our paths would cross again. In town, I overheard whispers at a diner about a man matching Caleb's description, someone who'd been seen near the ranger station, looking desperate. My pulse quickened. I didn't know what I was chasing, but I couldn't stop. Not now. The diner's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I sipped bitter coffee, my eyes scanning the room for any sign of Caleb. The waitress, a woman with a perm and a name tag reading Darlene, had seen someone like him, rugged, haunted, passing through just before dawn. Looked like he was running from something, she'd said, her voice tinged with pity. I left a crumpled 5 on the counter and headed for the ranger station, the note in my pocket feeling heavier with every step. Ellensburg was a small enough place that strangers stood out, and Caleb was no exception. The ranger, a grizzled man named Hank, confirmed it. A guy in a torn jacket had asked for a map, paid in cash, and vanished into the morning mist. Didn't say much. Hank grunted. Looked like he hadn't slept in days. I drove the winding roads of the forest, my Jeep rattling over gravel as I followed a hunch toward the Hoh River Trail. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and pine, and every rustle in the trees made my heart leap, hoping it was him. I didn't know why I was so drawn to a man I'd known for less than a night, but his eyes, those storm-filled eyes, had seen something in me I'd spent years hiding. By dusk, I found him. He was crouched by the river, splashing water on his face, his jacket discarded on the rocks. The sight of him, raw and unguarded, stole my breath. Caleb, I called, my voice cracking. He spun around, tense, like a deer caught in headlights. Ezra, what the hell are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing. I stepped closer, my boots crunching on the gravel. You left without a word. I didn't want to drag you into my mess, he said, his voice low. You don't know me. Then tell me. I crossed my arms, trying to hide the tremor in my hands. Who are you running from? He looked away, the river reflecting the fading light in his eyes. My brother, he said finally. He found out I'm gay. Didn't take it well. Things got ugly. My chest tightened. I knew that kind of ugly, the kind that leaves scars no one can see. I get it, I said softly. My dad, he's the same. Thinks it's a sin, a choice. I've been hiding my whole life. Caleb's gaze snapped to mine, and for a moment, we were just 2 men standing by a river, carrying the same weight. You don't have to hide out here, he said. Not with me. The words hit harder than I expected, cracking open something I'd kept locked away. We sat by the river, the water's murmur filling the silence as he told me more. His brother, Nate, had always been the golden child, successful, married, the pride of their conservative Portland family. When Caleb came out, Nate didn't just reject him. He threatened him, turned their family against him, and made it clear he wasn't welcome. Caleb had been on the road for weeks, living out of a backpack, trying to outrun the shame. I thought I could start over out here, he said, tossing a pebble into the water. But you can't outrun yourself. I wanted to reach for him, to tell him he wasn't alone. But fear held me back. Instead, I offered to share my campsite again, and he accepted with a nod. That night, we built a fire together, the flames casting shadows on his face as we talked about everything and nothing: music, dreams, the way the stars looked brighter out here. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years, like I was finally breathing after being underwater my whole life. But the peace didn't last. At dawn, a truck roared into the clearing, its headlights cutting through the mist. Caleb froze, his face paling. "That's Nate," he whispered. Before I could react, a man climbed out of the truck, tall, broad, with a face twisted in anger. "Caleb," he bellowed. "You think you can just disappear?" I stood, my heart pounding. "Stay back," I said, stepping between them. Nate's eyes narrowed, taking me in. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who's not letting you hurt him," I said, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. Caleb grabbed my arm. "Ezra, don't. He's dangerous." But I couldn't back down. Not now. Not when I'd finally found someone who saw me. I saw me. Nate's boots crunched on the gravel as he stalked toward us, his fists clenched. The air felt charged, like the moment before a lightning strike. I stood my ground, Caleb's hand still gripping my arm, his breath uneven behind me. "You think you can protect him?" Nate sneered, his voice dripping with venom. "You don't know what kind of trouble he's in." "Then tell me," I shot back, my voice steadier than I felt. "Because from where I'm standing, you're the trouble." Nate laughed, a cold, bitter sound. "He's a disgrace. Ran off after shaming our family. You think you're some kind of hero, kid." "Enough, Nate." Caleb's voice broke through, raw and desperate. He stepped forward, placing himself between me and his brother. "This isn't about you. Just let me go." Nate's eyes flashed with something darker: hatred. Maybe. Or something deeper. Something wounded. "You don't get to walk away," he said. "Not after what you did." I didn't know the full story, but I didn't need to. I saw the fear in Caleb's eyes, the way his shoulders tensed, bracing for a blow that might not be physical but would hurt just as much. "He's not alone anymore," I said, stepping beside Caleb. "You want him. You go through me." For a moment, Nate looked like he might lunge, but then he stopped, his gaze flickering between us. "You're both pathetic," he spat, turning back to his truck. "This isn't over, Caleb." The engine roared as he sped off, leaving a cloud of dust and silence in his wake. Caleb sank to the ground, his hands shaking. I knelt beside him, unsure of what to say. "You okay?" I asked finally. He nodded, but his eyes were distant. "I didn't want you to see that," he said. "I didn't want you to get involved." "Too late," I said, managing a small smile. "I'm in it now." He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something like hope in his eyes. We packed up the campsite in silence, the weight of Nate's threat hanging over us. I convinced Caleb to come with me to a motel in Forks, a small town nearby, where we could figure out our next move. In the dim light of the motel room, Caleb opened up more. He told me about his life in Portland, the carpentry shop he loved, the friends he'd lost when he came out, the nights he'd spent wondering if he'd ever find a place where he belonged. I listened, my heart aching for him, and shared my own story, the years of pretending in Ellensburg, the church sermons that made me feel like I was broken, the loneliness that had driven me to the forest. "You're not broken," Caleb said, his voice fierce. "You're You're incredible, Ezra. You stood up to Nate without even knowing me. I blushed, looking away. I just did what felt right. He reached for my hand, his touch warm and tentative. It's been a long time since anyone's done that for me. My heart raced, but I didn't pull away. For the first time, I let myself feel the truth I'd been hiding. I was falling for him. Not just because he was handsome or broken in the same ways I was, but because he saw me while I saw me and didn't look away. We stayed up all night, talking, laughing, sharing pieces of ourselves we'd kept hidden for too long. By morning, I knew I couldn't let him go. But Nate's threat loomed large, and I had a sinking feeling he wasn't done with us. Sure enough, as we left the motel, I spotted Nate's truck parked across the street. He was watching us, his eyes cold and unyielding. Caleb tensed, but I squeezed his hand. We'll figure this out, I said. Together. The motel parking lot felt like a battlefield, the air thick with unspoken threats. Nate's truck idled across the street, its engine a low growl that mirrored the tension in my chest. Caleb's hand tightened in mine, his jaw set as he stared at his brother. We need to go, I said, pulling him toward my Jeep. He's not going to stop. Caleb nodded, but his eyes were haunted. He never does. We drove north, toward Seattle, hoping the city's sprawl would swallow us whole. The road stretched out before us, lined with towering evergreens and the occasional glimpse of the Puget Sound, its waters glinting under the morning sun. Caleb was quiet, his fingers drumming on his knee, and I could feel the weight of his fear. He won't find us in Seattle, I said, more to convince myself than him. We'll blend in, figure out a plan. Caleb gave me a small, sad smile. You don't know Nate. He's relentless. I wanted to argue, to tell him we'd be safe. But the truth was, I didn't know what we were up against. All I knew was that I'd found something worth fighting for, and I wasn't letting go. In Seattle, we found a cheap apartment in Capitol Hill, a neighborhood buzzing with life and acceptance. For the first time, I saw Caleb relax, his shoulders loosening as we walked past rainbow flags and couples holding hands without fear. We spent days exploring the city coffee shops, bookstores, the waterfront, each moment knitting us closer together. One night, under the neon glow of a dive bar, Caleb kissed me. It was soft at first, tentative, like he was afraid I'd pull away. But I didn't. I kissed him back, my heart pounding as the world fell away. When we parted, he rested his forehead against mine, his breath warm against my skin. I don't deserve you, he whispered. You do, I said, my voice fierce. We both do. But happiness is a fragile thing, and Nate was never far behind. A week later, I found a note slipped under our apartment door. You can't hide forever. My stomach dropped. Caleb's face paled when he saw it, and I knew we couldn't keep running. We need to confront him, I said, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my chest. If we don't, he'll never stop. Caleb shook his head. You don't know what he's capable of, Ezra. He's not just angry, he's obsessed. Then we'll face him together, I said. I'm not letting him take this from us. We tracked Nate to a bar on the outskirts of the city, a gritty place filled with rough types. He was there, nursing a beer, his eyes locking onto us the moment we walked in. The air felt electric, every nerve in my body screaming to run, but I stood my ground. Nate, Caleb said, his voice steady but laced with pain. This has to stop. Nate leaned back, a cruel smile twisting his lips. You think you can just walk away from your family? From me? He's not your property, I said, stepping forward. He's his own person, and he's done nothing wrong. Nate's smile faded, replaced by something colder. You're in over your head, kid. Before I could respond, Caleb grabbed my arm, pulling me back. Let's go, he said, his voice tight. He's not worth it. But as we turned to leave, Nate lunged, grabbing Caleb's shoulder. The bar erupted into chaos, shouts and shattering glass as I shoved Nate back, my heart pounding. We stumbled outside, the cold night air hitting us like a slap. We can't keep doing this, Caleb said, his voice breaking. I can't keep dragging you into my mess. You're not dragging me, I said, cupping his face. I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you. The Seattle night was alive with city sounds, car horns, distant laughter, the hum of life, but all I could hear was Caleb's ragged breathing as we stood in the alley outside the bar. Nate's shadow loomed in the doorway, his silhouette a reminder that we couldn't outrun our pasts forever. I held Caleb's hand, my resolve hardening. This had to end. We need to go to the police, I said, my voice low but firm. He's stalking you, Caleb. That's not just family drama, that's a crime. Caleb shook his head, his eyes glistening. He's my brother. I can't. You can, I said, squeezing his hand. You deserve to be free. We both do. It took hours of talking, sitting on the curb under a flickering streetlight, but Caleb finally agreed. The next morning, we walked into the Seattle police station, our hands clasped tightly. The officer listened, her face kind but professional, as Caleb recounted years of harassment, Nate's threats, the notes, the way he'd tracked him across state lines. I added what I'd seen, my voice steady despite the fear gnawing at me. The police issued a restraining order, but we both knew it was just a piece of paper. Nate was out there, and he wasn't the type to back down. Still, something shifted in Caleb that day. He stood taller, his eyes brighter, like he was finally reclaiming a piece of himself. We moved forward, building a life in Capitol Hill. Caleb found work at a local carpentry shop, his hands steady as he shaped wood into something beautiful. I got a job at a garage, fixing cars and coming home each night to Caleb's smile. We weren't just surviving any more way we're living. One evening, as we walked along the waterfront, the sunset painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Caleb stopped and pulled me close. I love you, he said, his voice steady and sure. I don't know what I did to deserve you, but I'm never letting go. My heart swelled, and I kissed him, the world fading to just us. I love you too, I whispered. Always. Months later, we got word that Nate had been arrested not for stalking, but for a bar fight that had spiraled out of control. He was gone, at least for now, and the weight of his shadow lifted. Caleb and I started talking about the Futuria house. Maybe, somewhere quiet where we could build a life without fear. One night, we went back to the Olympic National Forest, to the same clearing where we'd met. We pitched a tent under the moonlight, the stars brighter than ever. As we lay together, the forest whispering around us, I realized something. I'd come here to find myself, but I'd found so much more. Caleb traced circles on my hand, his voice soft. You changed my life, Ezra. That night, when I unzipped your tent, I was lost. You gave me a reason to keep going. I smiled, my heart full. You gave me one too. Under the moonlight, we held each other, two souls who'd found refuge in the wild. The world wasn't perfect, and neither were we, but we'd found something real, something worth fighting for. And as the stars watched over us, I knew we'd face whatever came next. Together.